the more advanced functions of GradeMark, if we go back into our student and pull up all the comments, etc., that we have created for our individual students, one of the things that you can do when using your Quickmarks is to assign that comment to a rubric criterion. So, for example, and this is where with your criterions, it is really good to have slightly more detailed categories than are listed here. This is just a stylistic choice of the course coordinator, but you can, for example, have a range of different categories that are relatively explicit. They're limited in Turnitin in that you can only really have one word criterions. So you might have, if we look at our rubric, you might say story response, story, whoops, I'm changing that, story analysis, or those sorts of things. You can give those different criterions explicit names so that your student knows that this comment relates explicitly to that rubric category. You might connect this one to the paper in some way, and what we see in the rubric section is that that particular marking criteria has a comment attached to it. That comment is awesome. The story is awesome, or you've seen that. That not only helps a student connect the comments that you give them to the marking rubric that you grade at the end of the paper, but also helps you. If you have been looking at a student's text and you keep saying the same thing, awesome, or connections, or you see straight away that you've got all these comments that connect to it. That will affect how you mark them on the rubric as well. Oops. Okay, now what I want to show you as well is some of the Quickmark functions. So up in the top right hand corner of the Quickmarks, you have a little spanner, a tool icon, which you can use to arrange your Quickmark sets. So for example, I have, you can highlight on them all. These are all the Quickmarks that I have access to. I have a series of groupings, a literature review grouping, a digital story grouping, an outline essay grouping, for example. And then you have all the ones, the prefabbed ones, with the little locked icon. They're the prefab ones that Turnitin has created. Punctuation, usage, etc., etc. Now there are a number of things that you can do with these Quickmarks, and the reason why it's important to know that how you can use them is that you might want to share your Quickmarks with someone. For example, you might want you may have created a range of comments as a course coordinator, and you may want all your markers to use the same comments. In that case, you would export using this send icon in the top right corner of the Quickmark Manager. You may want to export the set, which we'll do now. And it saves it as a QMS file, which we might save. Let's save it in the desktop and call it Quick Story 2. By the same token, you as a marker might be emailed a series of Quickmarks from your coordinator and want to import the set. So you browse the file, we look at, I'm going to go to the desktop because that's where they were. We find our digital story QMS and we import that. Now that we have our digital second Quickmark set imported into the Quickmark Manager, we can do a range of things. We can rename the Quickmark, so whatever we want to call it. We can select a number of different Quickmarks that we want to keep or delete, for example, and in order to to do those different actions, we go up into this section here that says actions. Click on that. We can either add these to one of the existing sets. We can create a new set based upon these selections, or we can archive or remove from this set, so we can delete them from this set, for example. So you may receive all these Quickmarks in a set and go, they're just too many for me to deal with, I'm just going to remove them from this set or put them in a different place for now until I need them, or organize them according to groups like composition, format, punctuation, etc. And you can also edit individual comments. So for example, someone has sent you this comment of they, which is a pronoun problem, and you may think, oh, you know what, I'm going to tweak it a little bit so that it looks a bit, so that it is has information that I think is particularly relevant for marking. Maybe the person that wrote it isn't, you don't necessarily agree with the comment as it stands. You might want to make some tweaks, and then you can save it. Now this doesn't save the new comment for all the other markers. It just saves it for you. The comments that you edit and save and delete will only affect the things that you see when you're marking through Turnitin or Grademark. I'm just going to cancel that for the time being. You can create new Quickmarks. You may find that you want to have a new set that you want to work with. Maybe you want to create, as I did, I created a new set based upon digital story or the literature review or the outline essay. You might want to create a new one. You can also create new Quickmarks. Give them a new title, give them a description, you're awesome. You can save that. We see that now exists in our Quickmarks. New comment with the comment "You're awesome," which I can then edit in whichever way that I want. Now this is good if you're thinking about creating comments before you start marking. You may anticipate a range of comments based upon the assessment instructions or the marking rubric that you think, yeah, these things are going to come up, or at the very least I want to make sure that my markers are aware of these issues and that they offer comments to students on the basis of these issues throughout their essay. I might delete that new comment added. I might also delete the Digital Story 2 Quickmark set. I can do that by going up into the top right corner and deleting that set. Hang on, I'm just going to check that I'm deleting the correct one. Yes, let's delete that one. Yeah, good. Okay, so yeah, this is all the sort of stuff you'd want to do before you start marking, or if you wanted to really tweak the kind of groupings of your Quickmarks to make your marking easier. Now I'll just close that. As I say, when I'm talking about the grouping of the Quickmarks, what I mean is that you may not like to have all of your comments, this many comments available to you, so you might want to break them up so that you have more manageable amounts of Quickmarks to work with. So you can create the groupings, etc., in the settings of Quickmarks. Of course, you can always create Quickmarks whilst you're actually marking the paper, as explained in the previous video. The other thing that I wanted to show you very quickly was how to edit rubrics. As I say, this particular paper the rubric here was set up in a particular way. There are other ways that you can set up your rubrics. Now, I'm not going to go into some more of the administrative details on how to attach rubrics to assessments, etc., because I am working off a live assessment which I don't want to change too much. What I will do is show you through some of the rubrics that I've created in the past. Now, this is a rubric that I used for the digital story last year, which broke them down according to actual percentage marks, where the story was broken, the different aspects of the different categories, the different criteria, if you will, were given different percentile bands. 9%, for example, for the whether or not it had 4 suitable academic references. Now, this one, the benefit to this is that I don't know if you noticed from the previous video, but using those individual numbers for the marking rubric meant that we gave a lot of credits in one whole scale, but it didn't end up looking like a credit for that student's final mark. So, for example, if I go through that again and click on all the credit categories for this paper, it actually looks more like a distinction. And this comes down to the way that you actually enter in these numbers. And it depends on how many categories you have. Now, that's why I tend to prefer, so if you just go back, what I mean by this is if we look down the bottom, that's the percentage, rubric percentage. Out of 40, sorry, they get a 32, even though they were kind of a credit student. Now, that's why I like to use grade percentages that align with the grades, the grade categories that we use. Whether they be pass, credit, distinction, high distinction, because it attributes a rubric percentage that is more in line with these grade categories. So, for example, if I was to give the student all credits, that their rubric mark would be more like a 70. There are other ways that you can do it. You can actually attribute individual marks. Again, this is similar to what was happening in this paper here, where they have individual marks. And you kind of have to test it out so that you can, get run through it a couple of times so that you know that if you're giving students if you're marking them and giving them all these credits down the middle, that they're going to end up with a credit mark at the end of the assessment. Another thing you can do is actually use just a qualitative, which means that they don't have any marks at all. They just have the rubric categories that you click on, and then you just give them a mark at the end, which you pop into this section at the top here. Look, there are pluses and minuses to both. What I find is that when you have marks or percentages that generate a rubric score, it actually makes it more transparent and uniform for the markers. The other thing that it does is that it actually reduces the think time it takes you to go, well, what mark should I give them? Which as we know, a lot of the papers that we get, the outliers, the really good ones and the really bad ones, are easy to identify straight away. But a lot of them are kind of clumped in the middle, and differentiating between them can sometimes be time consuming. Remembering, of course, that no matter what the mark, the rubric, what mark the rubric generates, you can always tweak that mark to more appropriately reflect the kind of grading you would give that paper. So, as I say, having either the marks or the percentages in your rubric has advantages in that it does make it more uniform. It does make it more transparent. It is easier for newer markers who are not so used to quantifying these sort of qualitative assessments on essays, and it does speed it up. The advantage to having it as a qualitative assessment, which doesn't have any marks at all, is that it is entirely up to the marker. Now, some coordinators prefer this just as a strategy, and as I say, it's entirely up to the coordinator to make that decision. on how that works. But obviously you can click on all the rubric scales in the various criteria, but it won't generate a mark for you if you're using a qualitative rubric. We'll return back to the rubric that is being used for this assignment and close that. And that's basically it. As I said before, all you have to do if you're to save all the information that you've entered in, either through your comments or through your rubric, through your score, or your general comments, is to just close the box, and that will refresh and enter that into your Turnitin submission inbox, as we can see here. It's all pretty straightforward. Bottom line is, you know, just have a go before you get into your papers. Just have a go of a few of the functions of Turnitin, to just so that you get familiar with it. There's a lot of space to make it as user-friendly for you as you need to. You can tweak it so that it's just right for you, and the main aim is to speed up the marking, to make the marking process as transparent as possible and as uniform as possible, and to enable the marker to provide as many constructive comments to the students as they can without making the time used to mark any bigger. In actual fact, I've found that by using Turnitin, I can provide lots and lots of substantial comments and feedback to the student, and do it well within the time allocation for each assignment, which is something I simply couldn't do when I was marking hard copy, because, you know, the act of writing was exhausting. The act of rewriting the same comments over and over again just seemed to take forever, and it started to take its toll, and you always went over the allocated time. So yeah, if used properly, basically it's a really, really handy tool, and I hope you have gotten something out of this video.